Well, folks, here again for the weekly forecast. Last week we indicated the models were showing that we were going to be in a northwest flow for primarily the majority of this past week. That's exactly what happened, although the placement of that northwest flow was a little bit off. It actually shifted a little bit more toward our west. So the main precipitation bands, instead of hitting eastern Nebraska, really started to impact portions of western Nebraska, with some of the residual moisture moving into eastern Nebraska. So we actually see more precipitation in the southwest and west central Nebraska than was originally projected, and in some locations in eastern Nebraska a little bit less. So overall, we can't complain that we did receive precipitation. There are some pockets still of dryness that have developed over the last 30 days, and we'd like to see some of those eliminated, especially if the models are correct and turning toward a drier trend as we move into the middle of next week and beyond. So let's get to the models and see whether or not there is that chance for precipitation. The thunderstorms that moved through last night are now exiting the state this morning, and we expect regeneration along the periphery of this ridge to our south, primarily impacting the central and east central portion of the state and portions of northern Nebraska and southern South Dakota. Now as we go into tomorrow, that ridge starts to shift toward the east a little bit and actually buckle somewhat. So we are going to see most of our moisture channel laying across a very extreme northern portion of Nebraska and the Dakotas, and we will see much drier conditions and warmer conditions as we get into the southern plains. So overall, it doesn't look like a big significant precipitation event expected tomorrow. As we get into Monday, however, we're going to see this ridge starting to build in. That produces a northwest flow across eastern Nebraska and Iowa. So any thunderstorms that develop are likely to come from the eastern Dakotas and move southeastward toward eastern Nebraska and Iowa, with primarily the major focus of the precipitation centered over the state of Iowa. As we go into Tuesday, the ridge starts to expand even farther toward the north, bringing much warmer conditions to a good portion of western Nebraska, and that northwest flow regime, which is the boundary of this eastern ridge, will shift toward our east, primarily impacting the upper Midwest and portions of Iowa, Wisconsin, and Michigan, with little in the way of any chance of significant moisture across the state. As we get into Wednesday, the ridge really starts to expand toward the east, bringing in that 90-degree weather across eastern Nebraska and keeping the precipitation pretty much north and east of the state. As we get into Thursday, we are looking at an expansion of that ridge to incorporate all of Nebraska, but we also have a big trough starting to move into the Pacific Northwest that will start to act on this ridge as we get into Friday. But more importantly, we will start to see this ridge break down as we get into Friday, and as we do, that will increase the chance of precipitation across the Dakotas, Montana, and some of that moisture might start creeping into western Nebraska, with the expectation that we will start to see some of that moisture moving across the state as we get into next weekend. So as we look at the temperature forecast, very hot conditions will remain in place across the western part of the state, especially as that ridge builds in. For eastern Nebraska, we will see pretty much normal to slightly below normal temperatures through Tuesday before we start to warm up to above normal temperatures as we get into the middle of next week and later as that ridge builds in. 8 to 14-day forecast from next Thursday through the following Tuesday indicates that we will see some semblance of that ridge remaining in place with the warm air through most of the central plains. And in terms of precipitation, below normal precipitation indicated, although I think the northern portion of this is probably overdone because of that system moving in from the Pacific Northwest.